Did you know who America sells to the most? Not China, not Europe. It's Canada, the quiet neighbor up north. Every year, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods cross the border into Canada. They are America's biggest and most stable customer, and also the easiest one to walk away. Now imagine if Canada suddenly shuts its doors, stops buying, no orders, no containers leaving port, no emails answered. States once proud of their strong exports would be the first to feel unemployment bankruptcies and broken supply chains from the ground up. America once thought of itself as the world's factory, but if its only friend turns away, who is the factory running for watch? Now top 10 US. States that will suffer most if Canada stops buying American goods. To find out if your state is on this list, because this affects your wallet, your meals, and your job. Don't wait until the border closes to realize the US economy doesn't pivot on its own, not without someone to sell to. Number 1. Michigan. Tens of thousands of people in Michigan used to believe that as long as the auto industry stayed strong, the state's economy would stand firm. But just within the first few months of 2025, a single click of cancel order from Canada shattered that belief entirely. Canada is Michigan's closest trading partner. According to the US Census Bureau, in 2024 alone, Michigan exported nearly $26 billion worth of goods to Canada, over 50% of the state's total exports. Most of it was cars, auto parts, and industrial machinery. Canada wasn't just a big customer, it was a critical link in Michigan's closed-loop auto manufacturing chain, but that relationship is rapidly deteriorating. Tensions over carbon taxes, stricter technical standards, and shifting Canadian consumer sentiment are turning them away from the American car dream. As a result, orders from this key market may plummet, or vanish entirely. With a just-in-time production system dependent on constant orders, even 1 week without new demand could shut down plants in Detroit, Flint, and Lansing. But the turmoil doesn't stop there. From parts suppliers in Grand Rapids to logistics companies in Ann Arbor, businesses would lose revenue across the board. Tens of thousands of workers, many of them sole providers, face the threat of job loss. A May 2025 report from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago warned Southeast Michigan faces the highest job risk if the Canadian market contracts by more than 20%. And don't forget, the damage isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. Thousands of families rose up thanks to the auto industry. With steady jobs, enough pay to buy homes, cars, and build futures in growing communities. Some households in Detroit are only now recovering post-pandemic, earning around $36,000 per year, still nearly 30% below the national average. One lost paycheck could push many into being unable to afford rent or basic bills. When Ford and GM came to Michigan, they transformed the local ecosystem. They funded hospitals, schools, and brought in businesses. But when Canadian orders vanish, money for public services shrinks. Diners, shops, and gas stations around factories go quiet. Every brick in that prosperous community begins to crumble. And above all, what Michigan loses isn't just export products. It's the resilience, the belief in a future held by thousands of workers who shaped the identity of Detroit Strong. If Canada shuts its doors, there will be no humming engines. Only the cold silence of abandoned dreams. Number 2. Florida. Following the auto industry shock in Michigan, Florida, where millions start each day with a glass of orange juice, is now grappling with a crisis just as severe. Did you know that Canada buys over 30% of Florida's packaged orange juice each year? But since April this year, in response to retaliatory tariffs from the US, Canada began halting orders of American agricultural goods, switching to cheaper options from Brazil, Portugal, or even Vietnam. This isn't just paperwork. It's real life. Juice plants in Orlando and towns like Lakeland and Winter Haven, once buzzing with machinery and workers, have fallen quiet. Shifts are cut. Many workers no longer get the call to show up, and those hit hardest are the longtime laborers, mostly seniors, people of color, and legal immigrants. They once saw these jobs as stable, their family's foundation. Now many stand at a crossroads, unsure how to survive. Across the border, supermarkets in Toronto are changing their shelves. Florida orange juice is gone, replaced by products from Mexico or Brazil. Shoppers complain the flavor is different and the price has gone up. Meanwhile, in Florida, thousands of gallons of orange juice are dumped unsold, driving orange prices down so badly they fall below production cost. Small produce shops around Tampa are shutting down one after another. With no exports and no way to compete with big supermarkets, they're forced to give up on their business dreams. Polk County, known for its vast orange groves, isn't spared either. Unemployment is soaring. People are lining up for food aid, something they never imagined they'd need. This isn't just statistics, it's skipped meals and growing anxiety in working-class homes. Florida may still have sunshine and fertile soil, but its people's confidence is fading. And while Florida has yet to recover, Ohio, the steel heart of America, now faces a similar threat. Number 3. Ohio. Can you imagine, after more than 30 years of tireless labor, the factory you've worked in suddenly shutting down? Not because the machines are broken. Not because of a lack of skills, but because all the orders suddenly disappeared. This is the reality drowning thousands of families in Cleveland, Toledo, and across Ohio as Canada, the largest customer, has turned its back. Ohio is not a land of urban glamour. This is a land of steel-heavy machinery trucks and the sweat of laborers. And steel, the cold gray metal, was once the backbone that sustained not only the factories, but also schools, clinics, supermarkets, and neighborhoods. When Canada Ohio Steel's largest buyer withdrew, everything collapsed like a building whose foundation had been pulled out. In just the first quarter of 2025, steel exports to Canada dropped by over 20%. As a result, factories in Cleveland, Youngstown, and Akron simultaneously cut shifts, closed down workshops, and began laying off workers. Losing their jobs, many thought it was only a temporary hardship. But within weeks, the entire community began to feel the real consequences. Electricity prices spiked because industrial power plants no longer had stable consumption. Many residential areas experienced rolling blackouts at night to relieve system load. Water treatment plants were also affected when the steel supply was disrupted. Pipes and maintenance parts became scarce. In some suburbs of Toledo, residents began to notice a fishy smell in the water, sometimes a yellowish tint, but no one came to fix it. The workers who once maintained the water systems were now unemployed. Everything is interconnected like a chain, and when one link breaks, the whole system explodes. Schools cut teachers. Public buses ran less frequently. Local hospitals had to postpone repairs due to lack of supplies and funding. People couldn't blame anyone in particular, only knew that everything was getting worse, week by week, like a severe illness with no cure. In Cleveland, once the heart of metallurgy, the number of homeless nearly doubled in just 6 months. They weren't addicts, weren't lazy, just simply unemployed, unable to pay rent, and no one hires people over 50. A few charities are exhausted from serving too many hot meals, but still can't meet the need. Ohio is falling into a silent but intense crisis, where steel breaks, power flickers, water smells. Homes are repossessed, and spirits are shattered. This is no longer about a single industry, but about what could happen to any industrial state if trade relations continue to break down. Number 4. Texas. Canadians used to be the most loyal, passionate customers of Texas-style grilled beef, from fragrant steaks to traditional BBQ full of signature flavor. The American dream through each meal, each gathering around glowing charcoal grills, once seemed to become a part of their lives. But now that dream is gradually fading. Since April 2025, Canada's new environmental tariffs and its shift to beef sources from Argentina or Brazil have brought an economic disaster to Texas. According to USDA trade data, updated in June 2025, beef exports to Canada dropped 42% compared to the same period last year, causing beef prices at Texas farms to plummet down 18% on average in just the first quarter. Meat processing plants in Amarillo and Lubbock had to reduce production. Many workers lost their jobs with no return date in sight. Ironically, Texans are caught between two worlds: surplus products that can't be sold, yet still can't reach domestic consumers due to rising transportation and distribution costs, which in turn push up meat and fuel prices in supermarkets. The average income in many West Texas cattle ranching areas is only around $40,000, $50,000, not over year, far lower than the state's average of $72,000. Factories are packed with unsold goods, while supermarkets within the state are seeing prices climb daily due to soaring transport and input costs. And even more tragically, this didn't happen overnight. Just a few years ago, Canadians lined up to buy Texas beef, an icon of the American BBQ feast. But now, as the world slowly shifts to new trends, the dream suddenly feels out of reach. Leaving Texans in doubt is what they have still welcomed. This change not only stripped Texas of a major revenue source, but also awakened a deeper fear. When people begin to change their lifestyles and preferences, can a once proud state like Texas still maintain its position? And for the people here who've devoted their lives to ranching and oil, the American dream is no longer just a story of products, but one of survival. Number 5. Iowa. The people of Ottawa never thought the day would come when they had to fight over a carton of eggs. In a state once called the food basket of the Midwest that used to be a joke. But ever since Canada stopped importing American agricultural products in early 2025, every familiar order in the lives of Iowans has been upended from supermarkets to banks, from farmlands to family meals. What once seemed abundant millions of tons of corn, soybeans, and pork that couldn't be exported now means local people, can't afford food. Businesses ran out of cash flow, cold storage wasn't maintained, goods piled up and rotted. When Canada, the #1 customer, turned away, Iowa didn't just lose revenue. They lost their own supply chain. Cedar Rapids witnessed food factories shut down en masse. Sioux City lost over 1,200 logistics jobs in just 3 months. Meanwhile, consumer goods prices soared by 12–15%, not because of food shortage, but because it couldn't be transported to market. A bitter paradox, warehouses full of food, yet people still go hungry. Though Iowa doesn't produce electric cars or semiconductors, it once fed all of North America with soybeans, pork, and corn. In 2024 alone, the state exported over $4.2 billion worth of agricultural goods to Canada, more than any other state. Nearly 60% of its pork and over half its soybeans once flowed toward Toronto and Calgary, like an economic lifeblood coursing across the border. But in 2025, Ottawa's new policies, from tax incentives for the EU to emission regulations, caused Canadian supermarket chains to simultaneously stop importing American goods. For Iowa, there was no room to wait. The harvest still comes. Farmers still have to reap pay loan interest and insurance, yet there's no one left to buy. According to the April report from Iowa Farm Bureau, farmers' incomes could drop up to 35% in Q2, pushing thousands of families to the brink of bankruptcy. In Marshalltown and Decorah, life didn't collapse overnight, but withered by the day like abandoned cornfields. A farming family making about $55,000 a year now must choose pay their child's tuition or keep their health insurance. They can't do both, and the future has never felt so uncertain. For Iowa, each freight car once headed to Canada carried not just food, but life. Now with those wheels lying still, the state isn't being knocked down by a single blow, but is slowly disintegrating like a cornstalk, dried out roots, rotting leaves withering without a sound. Iowa didn't collapse overnight. It's decaying hour by hour. But if this is where hunger begins to creep in, then in the next state, the economy is also trembling due to the neighbor's retreat. Number 6, New York. New York was once the heart of cross-border trade, where trucks stretched across the Peace Bridge carrying goods, medicine, food to Canada, fueling the vibrant rhythm of the entire Northeast. But now it's all just a memory. For the past 2 months, Buffalo seems to have fallen asleep. No more truck engines roaring. No more bustling crowds, only stifling silence. The latest report from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS May 2025, shows that the unemployment rate in the Buffalo-Niagara region has risen by 3.7% over the past half year, the sharpest increase since the 2008 crisis. Nearly half of small businesses here report revenue losses over 50%, with many forced to close temporarily or permanently. This isn't just about lost income. The freeze in trade has broken the supply chain. Transport companies, warehouses, support services, the backbone of the local economy, are now in hibernation. Albany, the capital of New York State, hasn't escaped either. Thousands of workers lost their jobs when light manufacturers lost the Canadian export market, sparking fears about an increasingly fragile future. With an average income of about $58,000 per year, according to the 2023 U.S. Census residents in Buffalo, Albany, now struggle with job loss, declining income. Housing prices in Buffalo fell 8% in Q2 2025, according to Zillow, a clear sign that many are leaving or can no longer afford the minimum standard of living. Pharmacies and small stores are increasingly deserted, and worries over rent, tuition, or healthcare weigh heavier every day. Once New York was a bustling gateway, a symbol of prosperity and inseparable connection with Canada. Canadians were not just trade partners, but a part of the cultural story here. But now with trade frozen, the once busy roads have grown cold, like a city exhaling its last breaths, carrying away dreams and hopes. Without swift changes, New York will face the risk of prolonged recession, with people abandoning the city, leaving behind frozen economic zones and a bleak future. And what's more frightening is that nightmare might not stop at New York. Number 7, Illinois. You might think food crises only happen in remote rural areas with arid land and low incomes. But right in Chicago, the largest city in Illinois, where vast supermarkets stand tall next to towering apartment blocks, that situation is becoming increasingly evident. Here people may still afford shopping, but they can no longer find the familiar foods that once made up their daily family meals. All these changes stem from a seemingly distant decision when Canada stopped importing U.S. goods. Illinois, especially the Chicago metropolitan area, is not only a manufacturing hub, but also the heart of the processed food industry in the Midwest. Unlike Iowa or Texas, where farming and livestock dominate, Illinois turns raw materials into frozen pizza snacks, canned soup, and cereal. The convenient quick meals that are staples in millions of refrigerators. Canada used to be one of the state's most important export markets, where made in Illinois, products were beloved from Aurora and Joliet to Elgin. According to USDA export profiles in 2024, Illinois exported over $8 billion in processed food products to Canada, accounting for nearly 25% of the state's total agricultural export value. However, in Q2 2025, new stricter regulations on additives, preservatives, and shipping conditions caused hundreds of containers to be held or returned at the border. According to FreightWaves, the number of delayed food containers increased by 31% in May 2025, further breaking an already fragile supply chain. The impact of that number isn't just a matter of dry reports. It's the real stories unfolding in every kitchen in Chicago. The operational chain from factory to cold storage to distribution stores is now seriously disrupted. Factories had to cut shifts or temporarily shut down, leading to dozens of canning workers in Joliet losing their jobs within just 2 weeks. Delivery drivers in Englewood also face the risk of unemployment with no income to cover living expenses. Not only low-income workers, even middle-income families, earning around $75,000 to $80,000 a year, are beginning to feel a marked change in their daily meals. Refrigerators once full of familiar products are now missing their favorite items. A popular soup box disappears from store shelves. A tray of deboned chicken increases in price by 27%. People begin to feel like they are living in a fake city, where money may still suffice, but choices are increasingly limited, and meals are no longer whole as before. Illinois is not starving, but Chicago, once known for its seamless supply chain and convenient meals, is gradually losing its former sense of security. When meals, something once taken for granted and constant, become a fragmented song, people's faith in urban stability begins to crumble with each missing bite. Number 8. Minnesota. Some collapses make no headlines, spark no protests or cries from the public. In Minnesota, the death unfolds under thick layers of snow falling on freight trucks, with no one coming to receive them. The border, once the state's lifeline, now feels frozen, halting all economic activity and daily life. Minnesota may not be a big name like Texas or Michigan in the public eye, but to those who know the trade, it is one of the busiest gateways to Canada. Key exports include lumber, electricity, raw food materials, and light machinery transported through border crossings like Grand Portage International Falls and Baudette. In 2024 alone, the state exported nearly $6.5 billion to Canada, 40% of which were semi-finished goods, meaning if they can't be exported, they also can't be consumed domestically, turning into worthless stockpiles. Then one April day in 2025, Canada suddenly tightened controls enforcing harsh import standards for wood and electricity from the US, along with stricter inspections on unprocessed food, citing environmental protection and food safety. As a result, hundreds of containers were stuck at transit stations, creating major bottlenecks in the already fragile supply chain. Reports from the Minnesota Department of Commerce showed that nearly 30% of exporting businesses in the state were severely affected within just 6 weeks, especially in border towns that rely primarily on transportation as their economic lifeline. In Duluth, a once bustling port city with ships and trucks, operations are now down to less than 60% capacity. Many cold storages were forced to temporarily shut down due to high electricity costs while goods couldn't move. Duluth is gradually entering a state of freeze, not just economically but spiritually, as jobs and livelihoods suddenly vanish. And here's where the story gets more heartbreaking: vulnerable workers. Lower middle class families, seasonal workers in logistics and loading have lost 50-70% of their income within a few short weeks. A small restaurant in Grand Marais, once stable and sourcing ingredients from Canada, now faces supply depletion and dwindling customers, pushing the owner toward the brink of closure. Minnesota is a cold state, but the harshest chill right now doesn't come from winter. It is the disconnection. The feeling of being frozen out from the world as once wide-open border gates suddenly slam shut, as supply routes freeze the entire regional economy, from urban centers to suburbs, slowly slips into silent paralysis, and people sink into the fear of losing their everyday livelihood. Number 9. Wisconsin. Can you imagine going to the supermarket one day and seeing the cheese shelves empty? Not because they ran out, but because the entire state of Wisconsin, which produces 1/3 of America's cheese, has nowhere to sell it. Then factories shut down towns, empty out with no reason left to operate. Wisconsin was once called the Cheese Kingdom. Every year, the state produces over 3.4 billion pounds of cheese. Nearly 900 million of that used to be exported to Canada, the generous neighbor fond of aged cheddar organic butter and frozen curds. Canada alone accounted for over 26% of the state's total agricultural export value. But in May 2025, Canada issued new regulations on imported animal fats. It sounded technical, so pretty somewhat banatrice, so terrified to it. But the result was hundreds of containers being blocked at ports not allowed to unload. Unable to turn back or sell domestically, many shipments were destroyed or sold at a 50% loss, according to the Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association. In Wisconsin, time isn't money. It's milk fermenting. Every passing hour without proper storage means cheese has to be discarded, and when cheese dies, so do the factories. Towns of 10,000 to 30,000 residents reliant on one or two plants begin to go cold. Not because of the weather, but because the money stops flowing. How do you live when your factory job is gone, the neighborhood grocery store closes, and the local clinic cuts services due to budget shortfalls? That's what's happening in Green Bay, Monroe, and Eau Claire. If you're a household earning $69,000 a year, the average here, just 2 months without pay, forces you to choose fuel or a medical checkup. Don't think only those in the industry are suffering. When 18-month-age cheese is dumped like defective goods, the entire community loses its value. When food is treated as excess, no one feels secure about the future. And if tomorrow you can't find cheese for breakfast, it's not just one missing item. It's a sign the entire state of Wisconsin is running out of breath. The dairy industry doesn't die with a bang. It dies quietly, with like the hum of a fridge stopping at midnight. And when that chill creeps into middle-class kitchens, people realize losing Canada isn't just losing a customer. It's losing balance in life. Number 10, Vermont. Vermont and Canada have long shared a deep common bond of green lifestyle reverence for nature and sustainable agricultural values. Canadians used to be the most loyal customers of Vermont's purest organic and handcrafted goods, never haggling over price because to them it was a choice for healthy living and environmental responsibility. Yet in 2025, that seemingly unshakable trust faced a harsh test. Longtime customers suddenly canceled thousands of orders, not because the product quality dropped, but because of a prolonged, frosty rift in trade between the two sides. Canada's halt on importing Vermont agricultural goods struck like a bolt out of the blue, erasing its biggest market and the livelihood of many farming households right before their eyes. What does that mean? Organic products? Which require intensive labor, high costs, and have a short shelf life, now sit unsellable. Losing the Canadian market, Vermont farmers not only lost income, but also fell into uncertainty, unsure who they'd sell to in the near future. According to a USDA report, June 2025, exports of Vermont's organic and handcrafted goods to Canada dropped by over 65% year on year. Farmers who previously earned around $50,000 annually now see income fall below $35,000, triggering a chain of dire consequences, lack of investment hardship in living costs, and anxiety within the farming community. The greatest pain lies in the loss of trust. When the only market that respected and paid fairly for green products closes its doors, many Vermont farmers now face not just financial difficulty, but deep distress. They don't know who will buy what they create anymore. Vermont's story is proof of a greater tragedy. A community once proud of its harmony with nature, now confronting the betrayal of markets and the modern world. While other states collapsed from losing steel or auto, the backbone of their economies, Vermont, proud of its green living and maple syrup ties to Canada, was not spared this grim fate. You may have thought only industrial states like Ohio, Michigan, or Texas need to worry about whether Canada still buys their goods. But reality proves even green states, once proud of clean energy, fair environment, and sustainable lifestyles, are now standing at the edge of recession because of a broken relationship with Canada. Because when Canada is no longer America's biggest buyer, we don't just lose a trading partner, we lose a listener, the most stable counterpart in a chaotic world. Millions of workers see their hours cut. Farmers have no one to sell to, small businesses have no one to deliver to. 2. And ultimately, citizens watch bills rise as dinners dwindle. The worst part: no state is truly safe. Whether you live in Silicon Valley or the cornfields of Nebraska, the dependency on Canada runs deep through the supply chain. And it's time we ask ourselves if we can't shield our lives from external shocks. Who will protect the way we live today? If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episode. The analysis in this video is based on current data and independent perspectives, and is not intended to make absolute predictions or cause confusion.